What do you think? Will we see some sort of coordinated action? Reuters just flashing this headline that apparently the statement is going to say perhaps otherwise at this point in time. But what do you think? Does the global economy need some sort of coordinated action?
That's a very good question. I think the likelihood of us getting anything substantial out of the G7 finance ministers is extremely remote. I mean, if you think about the difficulties that a lot of the regions involved here have got in doing anything in terms of expansionary fiscal policy, then you very quickly come up thinking, yeah, that's not really a workable option. Coordinated monetary policy, yeah, I guess it's possible, but coordinated with whom? The US is the only central bank with any room to cut here. So we've had the sort of usual, we're monitoring the situation closely and we stand ready to blah, 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 blah from the ECB and from the Bank of Japan. But actually, it's only the US who can do anything here. So, coordinated in terms of words. And the market is taking a lot from this. And let's be absolutely honest here, nothing has actually happened yet. They've just said they might do something. And well, yeah, they will. The Fed will cut shortly. But, what are the rest going to do?
Yeah, how much do you expect the Fed will cut by, and how large, or when do you think that will happen? Will it be at this month's meeting, or do you perhaps see some sort of emergency measure, or is that just going to spook the markets if we have some sort of emergency 50 basis point cut out of the Fed?
Yeah, it's difficult, really. I was chatting about this with a colleague earlier today, and if you do something before the meeting, then what do you do at the meeting? Do you have to follow up with something else as well? Well, you probably do. So I think at this stage, while most of them still are trying to figure out exactly what the implications of this are, they're not going to want to box themselves in with moving too rapidly. So I think a lot of encouraging words leading up to that March 18th meeting, and then 50 at that meeting, and with plenty of scope and plenty of hints that there's more to come down the track should that be necessary.
Okay, Dan has a question for you.
Rob, to your point, and this is really interesting, isn't it? Because, yes, while the Fed can improve liquidity and it can loosen monetary policy to try and navigate markets and the economy through this coronavirus outbreak, Jay Powell can't necessarily repair a broken supply chain, and he can't go and tap the Chinese business traveler on the shoulder and say, it's okay, you can go back to China now. So what impact will lower rates actually have here? And I guess from a personal perspective, would you be travelling to China today?
Well, to that last point, no. And you're absolutely right. I mean, actually, people are talking about the supply boosting measures and the demand boosting measures. And of course, monetary policy typically works through the demand channels. But even then, all the sorts of things that you're talking about, tourism, going, eating out, sticking yourself in a metal box with a load of people you don't know, like public transport. These are things where an interest rate cut is not going to encourage you to increase the demand for those consumer services. So on almost every level, it doesn't work. And what you probably need is policies which will address, if this starts to become a much more widespread epidemic or pandemic, and you see really big impacts on supply chains in the way that China has, what you need are measures of financial forbearance. Firms won't be earning. They won't be able to get their products out. They won't be able to make their products. They'll still be having to pay employees. They'll still have creditors banging on their door for the money. And yeah, to some extent, they'll have some debt service, and it helps a little bit at the margin there. But really, interest rate cuts do very little in this environment.